Wonderful. So good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Dr. Paula Clemente Vega, and I will be chairing today's session on behalf of the Open Library of Humanities. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to Mainstreaming Diamond, Regional Perspective, Shared Futures. In this session, we will hear from key voices in the Diamond Open Access community, who will share how their organizations are supporting and advancing Diamond Open Access models, which are those where neither authors nor readers pay any fees. While Diamond Open Access is already well established in some regions, particularly in Latin America, it remains more marginal in many places of the global north, despite growing institutional support. So our aim today is not only to discuss alternative publishing models, but to explore how Diamond Open Access may become mainstream, what conditions are needed to make it the norm rather than the exception. We will have 50 minutes at the end of the webinar for discussions and questions, so please feel free to post your questions in the chat during the session, and we will address them at the end. We are also going to record the session, and when I say before, and upload that to our YouTube channel. And we are going to start with Professor Caroline Edwards, who will be talking about the Open Library of Humanities and the Open Journal Collective. Caroline Edwards is a professor of contemporary literature and culture at Birkbeck University of London and executive director of the Open Library of Humanities. She is the author of Utopia and the Contemporary British Novel, and the editor of the Cambridge Companion to British Utopian Literature and Culture since 1945. She's also the co-editor of China Mayville, Critical Essays, and Maggie G, Critical Essays, and Caroline is also currently writing her second monograph, Hopeful in Humanism, the Elemental Aesthetics of Eco-Catastrophe. She is also widely known as an open access advocate, having co-founded the Open Library of Humanities with Professor Martin Eve in 2013. She's also currently leading a team of 12 staff of the Open Library of Humanities, expanding the publisher's portfolio of leading humanities journals and overseeing the growth of the Open Library of Humanities open source publishing platform, Genaway. In 2025, Caroline launched the Open Journal Collective, which is an international collective of academics, librarians, and university-based publishers. The Open Journal Collective will launch in 2026 with Diamond Open Access journals portfolios in the art, humanities, and social sciences, as well as science, technology, engineering, and math. Thank you, Caroline, for being part of this collective effort to advance Diamond Open Access, and now I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Paula. So let me just share my screen and slideshow from start. I think everybody can see that now. And could everybody mind muting? I'm getting some, like a crunching crisp packet or something that's making me feel hungry. Thank you. Got to miss lunch, right? Yeah, so thank you, everybody. So I was just going to say a little bit about the Open Library of Humanities and then something about the Open Journals Collective and why I think mainstreaming Diamond Open Access is super important. So as Paula mentioned, Paula and myself and 10 other colleagues run the Open Library of Humanities. This is a scholar-led, not-for-profit academic publisher. We are based at Birkbeck in the University of London. And we launched 10 years ago. So this September is our 10th birthday. I'm still hearing crisp packets.
If people can mute their microphones,
I think,
please.
Paula, you can go and mute them as well. I do it myself, but I can't do that and share the slides. But yeah, thank you. Perfect. So we are scholarly led and we are community owned. Right now, the OLH has about 34 open access journals. The number's always changing because we grow by around 5 journals each year. And we prioritise trying to flip journals from commercial publishers to Diamond open access models. So these are titles across the humanities and social sciences. And one of the ways we've been able to do this and make ourselves financially sustainable is to develop our own software. So we run a publishing platform called Janeway, We use it for all of our own journals publishing. It's an end-to-end publication system, but it's also used by around 400 journals worldwide. It's open source, so folks are using it for free. And then we have about 50 other library publishers and university presses who use it for all of their journals publishing. They also use it as a preprint server. They use it as a data repository or an institutional repository. It can do books hosting as well. And here are some of our clients at the moment: the California Digital Library, UCL Press, University of Michigan Press, Iowa State Digital Press, the Society for Clinical Data Management, and the University of Arizona Libraries. So the OLH was one of the first organisations that I'm aware of in sort of the UK, America, Europe, so I guess loosely the global north, to launch a library membership business model for paying for the publishing costs to be able to publish Diamond Open Access and not charge any author fees. Obviously, Diamond Open Access is incredibly well established in Latin America, for example, where for decades it's been publicly funded, but it's been much more difficult to set up sustainable business models in places like the UK and the US. And so we established a network of libraries with early seed funding from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and later we received some funding from the Arcadia Trust as well. We've now got around 340 libraries, research councils and consortia worldwide who they all pay a small amount every year to cover our non-profit publishing costs. And our Janeway platform is growing quite quickly. So as I mentioned, this is an open source digital publishing infrastructure. It's actually licensed under a copyleft license, which means anybody has access to our GitHub code base. They can go into the repository there and they can add their own modifications on the strict understanding that any such modifications themselves have to be openly licensed. And so that license protects against any kind of commercialization of our platform and our code base. Since we're coming up to Halloween, it's always a good time to share a zombie poster that we launched 2 years ago. We were trying to draw attention to the idea of zombie journals. So zombie journals is a term that first came into circulation in 2015 by linguists who were talking about the journal Lingua from Elsevier. And the journal editorial board resigned en masse and they moved over to the Open Library of Humanities under the new title of Glossa. And this is a flagship general linguistics journal with a large following. And so what was left behind at Elsevier was a kind of commercially run journal where they replaced the editors. And we defined a zombie journal as being like the kind of undead husk after the research community has sort of moved away from a journal because it's lost faith with a commercial publisher who's putting a lot of pressure on it to raise surplus profit. And in the last year, I've actually lost count. I think we flipped 10 journals last year and another 6 in the process of flipping this year. 16 journals in 2 years with a small team is a lot of journals to be moving across. But as you can see from some of the ones named here, and I can't name all of them because not all of them are public yet, they've been leaving places like Wiley in particular, Springer Nature, Taylor and Francis, Elsevier, and more recently, Cambridge University Press. So generally, we're seeing an increasing number of journals, particularly owned by scholarly societies, who are being faced with closure from commercial publishers who are saying to them, you're not making enough money, we're going to fold the journal. Or in some cases, I've heard of editors saying they're being forced to merge with another journal at the same publisher to try and make the journal profitable. And so usually they get in touch with us and we receive a lot of inquiries and applications throughout the year to try and move over to the OLH. But I was going to say something a bit more about the broader Diamond Open Access movement with colleagues here. I'm joined today on this panel by my co-directors of the Open Journals Collective, so Dr. Rupert Gatti and Joanna Ball and myself incorporated the Open Journals Collective as a community interest company in May of this year. So that is a UK-based non-profit organisation, which we will convert into a charity in the coming months. But just to give you some context about why this came into being, At the OLH, I spend a lot of time talking to library partners who support us and work closely with us on shared advocacy. And they were saying to me, as they have been saying for years, that transformative agreements, also known as read and publish deals, so these are the large deals negotiated on behalf, for example, in the UK, of all university libraries managed by JISC, which is our infrastructure, national level infrastructure kind of support organisation, that these agreements are unaffordable and that they're also inequitable. So these agreements are supposed to provide commercial publishers with lost income when they aren't able to sell subscriptions because material is open access, and instead they move to an author pays model. And then those get aggregated into these big deals, they're called. We're in a funding crisis in the UK. I'm sure everybody in this meeting is probably aware of this, but about 3/4 of UK universities by the end of this calendar year are going to be in deficit. And that's according to the government's own figures via the Office for Students. So we know that librarians are having to make very difficult decisions. We know that they're having to cut their budgets. And that means there's huge pressure on either bringing down the costs of these big deals or walking away from them altogether. And so the librarians I was talking with were saying what we really want to do is be supporting community-led projects like the Open Library of Humanities. We want to be supporting non-profit, university-based initiatives. We want to be bringing our investment back into the university sector. We're fed up with paying money out to commercial providers who continue to record really high profits at places like RELX, the group that owns Elsevier, Informa, the group that owns Taylor and Francis. If you look at their business accounts each year, their record profits that they're delivering each year. So the reason why community-led initiatives work so well is that they are cost effective. We've worked really hard to build our own infrastructure. It is open source. It is much cheaper than commercial providers. We are actually scalable. So there's an enormous amount of collaboration that already happens within the Diamond open access community. And the projects you're going to hear about on this panel are a fantastic example of just how much energy and momentum there is right now around university-based non-profit publishing. We offer each other supported services. We work together on shared advocacy. We work closely aligning our technologies. So it really builds on a pre-existing ecosystem that is already in quite a healthy shape, but it needs more money to make it sustainable. And finally, it is mission aligned with the universities and with the libraries themselves. So we co-designed what is called the Open Journals Collective. We were very fortunate that we are good friends with folks at the Open Book Collective, and so we were able to draw on years of expertise where they have developed a sustainable funding model for publishing monographs, open access. And so our kind of main mission here then is to produce and publish cutting edge research, to collectively raise investment from our library partners, to support up to about 300 journals we'll launch with in January in a couple of months, to then bring that money back to the research communities that are the lifeblood that support those journals, the scholarly associations, the editorial boards, and the individual editors themselves, and to build this sustainable future. And it's super important. This isn't just about open access publishing. This is about open source knowledge production and open source infrastructure for publishing. I've been preparing the library brochure to send out to early adopters for the Open Journals Collective package. And I picked out a few highlights of some of the fantastic journals. What we've done then is we've brought together about 20 publishing organisations, all of which are university-based, all of which are non-profit, and all of which publish Diamond open access journals. Collectively, we're putting our journals into this offer to libraries. The Open Journals Collective is not a publisher. It will have a catalogue that then you can visit the website and it will link you through to the journal homepages. So all the journals carry on as they are, hosted, either self-hosted or published by their own publishers. And you can see here some of these titles are very prestigious, you know, things like the International Labour Review dates back to 1921, and it's the official journal of a UN agency set up after World War I. The Rijksmuseum Bulletin is the publication of the Rijksmuseum in the Netherlands. We've got things like the Edinburgh Journal of Botany, which is the official journal of the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh. So there's some really great titles here, as well as a lot of newer born digital publications, which is fantastic. So very briefly, just to finish up in the last 2 minutes, I think, here are some of the features of this collection. These are all peer-reviewed articles. They all have to be indexed in the Directory of Open Access Journals, which Joanna manages. They have high quality metadata standards, and there's more work we can do to improve that across the collective over time. They have comprehensive indexing and discoverability. Authors will retain their rights through Creative Commons licenses. And we are going to be doing a lot of community work around you know, building editorial networks, about helping newer journals or less experienced editorial teams to professionalize Diamond Open Access publishing. There's a lot of really exciting DIY publishing, and that's how I myself got into open access, just by publishing my own journal with my colleagues and my friends. And so it's a certain number of academics who are running their own titles and have that kind of really important editorial autonomy and independence, don't necessarily know things about metadata or things about how to index or how to improve discoverability within the complicated library systems, how to get those systems switched on at the back end and so on. So there's a lot of work that I think we can do as a collective, which I'm really looking forward to. Here are some of the publishers so far. We're all signing contracts at the moment. As you can see from the UK, we've got folks like UCL Press, LSE Press, and the OLH. Edinburgh Diamond up in Edinburgh, and then stateside we've got the MPub team at Michigan, we've got the eScholarship team from the University of California, University of Pennsylvania Press, and ERID, which is the Canadian Research Council funded platform in Canada. This is just a slide to kind of give some indication of what the community structure will look like. We will have a management team over time. We will be recruiting staff to the OJC Central to help run the administration. We'll have a community hub, which is a really exciting part of our website, which will be a platform where editors can contact one another. We can message each other. It'll have sort of a social media feel. We can run events and so on. And we'll be building a library hub for librarians as well. But I think that's me out of time. So thank you very much for listening and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Let's now introduce the next speaker. So our next speaker is Professor Joe Deville. He's the Managing Director of the Open Book Collective and Professor in Science and Technology Studies at Lancaster University. Joe is currently leading the Copim Open Book Futures project, which is developing a fairer, more sustainable and more diverse ecosystem for the production, funding and preservation of open access books. He's also a co-founder and co-editor of Mattering Press, a Diamond Open Access book publisher and UK registered charity, and a co-founder of Scholar-Led, a consortium of scholar-led, not-for-profit open access book publisher. Thank you so much, Joe, for accepting to participate in these events. And now the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Paula. And yeah, hopefully this fits really nicely into some of the things that Caroline was just talking about. So we're going to move briefly, well, not briefly, we're going to move, I guess, for the next 3 presentations from the world of journals to books. And then I think coming back to journals at the end. And so what I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to be talking about the Open Book Collective, that Paolo just mentioned, but I'll also be talking more broadly about open access books as a case study in collaboration. So Caroline just talked about, you know, the importance of collaborating across these kinds of initiatives. And I think in the book space, we are seeing that materialize in some really interesting ways. And to sort of like to go back a little bit, so Paolo just mentioned that, yeah, I was involved in setting up this organization called Scholar-Led. And we had a small grant some years ago now, and we developed a range of kind of shared conference presences. And this is one of the photos of this. You can't really see it that well in this picture, but there are a couple of things I just want to highlight here. On the left, you have there a kind of a book that contains within it the front pages of the catalogues of a range of different publishers. So someone visiting the stand can flick through it and see books from the range of different publishers. And then on the right, that red thing there, the book of books, that's actually attached to a USB stick that contains the entire book catalogues of all the participants of Scholar Led, so that someone at a conference could, in principle, pick up that USB stick, put it into their computer. Okay, maybe some risks of getting a virus in someone else, but nonetheless, put it in their computer and then download the entire catalogue of all those publishers in about 30 seconds. And for me, this still always resonates as an example of the potential of open access, and also the potential of collaboration. And that's something that I and a number of colleagues have been thinking about in the years since this little project in a number of different ways. And I think it's also important just to establish like a context for this, where we are seeing, we've had some discussion in the chat about what is commercial and so on. Certainly, in what I'm really interested in is the work of large commercial publishers who are in the process of buying up many of the infrastructures for, in this case, open access book publishing, of course, scholarly communication in general, but particularly I'm talking here about the infrastructures for open access book publishing. And here are just some examples of things that have happened in recent years that touched on the infrastructures of open access book publishing, various purchases and acquisitions, and this kind of ongoing consolidation that we're seeing in this space. Often the figures involved aren't publicly disclosed, but, you know, in this case, the purchase of Hindawi by Wiley, the purchase price was close to $300 million, which I suppose points us all to the fact that we're not talking about work here that is in any way financially insignificant. And for those of you that follow this world, you'll also know that Knowledge Unlatched has recently transferred to annual reviews. Which in a way you sort of see some of these things being shuttled around. Annual reviews is non-profit. I think it's important to emphasize as far as I understand it. And I suppose this has kind of led many of us to argue for an alternative way of doing scholarly communication, and this is a bit relating to what Caroline was talking about as well, that open access is only part of the story, and that alongside open access we need open infrastructures. And I think one of the things that we've seen in the book space is an emerging, innovative, collaborative, open ecosystem for open access book publishing emerging. And from the way I see it, this is something that we should be really talking about as an innovation, as a way of thinking about what the practicalities are of doing scholarly communication that is being materialized in some really interesting ways, that to me provides a model for how we should think about some of the ways that the scholarly system could be organized. I want to emphasize that I don't think it's the only way it can be organized. This particular case study that I'm going to introduce is just one way. We can think of many ways that this could be different, and I'm not in any way suggesting that what I'm going to present is kind of like the model, even for books, because I think there are many different possibilities here. It's just an example. And in terms of books, again, another part of the context here is an increasingly diverse open access book publishing landscape. So the Scholar-led, we had a range of independent open access diamond publishers that have set up. These are the publishers that were the initial members of the Scholar-led group. Publishing, you know, we're going to hear about open book publishers in a second from Rupert, publishing really high quality peer-reviewed scholarship that's having considerable impacts, winning prizes and so on in a range of different fields. And within the broader space, you know, a really wide range of diverse and interesting presses doing important work, putting out novel, innovative scholarship, and increasingly becoming accepted within their fields as a serious option to consider for scholars looking to disseminate their works. I've got a couple of also newer initiatives in there that we have been supporting as the Open Book Collective as well through our grant funding program, which I'll come on to later on. But to go back to this case study, what I want to do actually is to use the principles of open access in my presentation and borrow from a poster that was put together by Neil Stern, Kevin Sanders, who I think is here in the call, and Tobias Steiner, one of our colleagues, which was highlighting the particular way that a group of publishers, in this case, a group of Dutch publishers, the Netherlands University Presses, were thinking about how they could assemble the various different infrastructures they needed to support their work. So this is a poster that I am using because it's CC licensed, and I'm fully giving credit, I hope, to the creators in so doing. And I'm going to use this as an example of the way that open infrastructures can be configured so as to be interoperable. So to start with the Open Book Collective that we have here at the top, I'll come back to this to talk more about the Open Book Collective at the end. But the Open Book Collective is a way that these presses can start to think about how to solve the puzzle of funding some of their work. I say some because, like many publishers, they have diverse revenue streams and some institutional support, but additional funding could really help them scale their work and make it much more sustainable and avoid things like volunteer labour. Open Book Collective currently has 18 provider members. Open Book Publishers, that we'll hear about in a second, is one of those. And we have a range of other publishers based in different countries. Really happy just this week to launch our 15th publisher, which is Edizioni Ca' Foscari, or Venice University Press. And I suppose that represents also our ambition to include members that are not just publishing in English or based in the Anglosphere. We also include 3 what we call service providers, PKP, OAPEN, DOAB, and TOTE Open Metadata, providing some of the infrastructures that we'll hear about in a second. So that's kind of maybe addressing some of the funding picture. Then for managing their production workflow using Open Monograph Press, which is developed by Public Knowledge Project, again, an Open Book Collective member, helping them provide, supporting the various different stages of workflow from submission to production. Open source, free to use, interoperable. And then for the metadata management and dissemination, and also some of the archiving using TOTE Open Metadata, which is, again, potentially free for publishers to use if they wish to just manage and enrich their metadata, and make it far, far easier for publishers to disseminate their metadata to a range of different places. And then if they do have funds available, then they can join the TOTE Plus service and disseminate their OA content far and wide incredibly easily. And my own publisher, Matching Press, we're a member of TOTE Open Metadata, and we use the service and find it incredibly helpful and solving that part of the publishing puzzle that we just don't have time to get involved with, as well as allowing us to much more simply archive our books, so that when somebody asks us, how do you ensure that your books will last for the long term, we can say, well, actually, that happens really easily through TOTE, meaning that our books are managed better, found easier, and read more. Again, TOTE Open Metadata, non-commercial and highly open source. Then, in terms of some of the other aspects of their work, turning to the work of the OAPEN Foundation, including their Director of Open Access Books. DOAB is a discovery service and catalogue providing links to books. We have the Open Library, which provides a sort of full-scale hosting service. And then these initiatives have developed a range of other resources that provide support for both publishers and also for authors who are thinking of publishing their works open access. Okay, so that's kind of the ecosystem, and there's other parts of it as well. So you can see there's operas in terms of usage monitoring and so on. I'm not going to go into all that, but the point is that you have here an assemblage of different initiatives that are being used by a range of publishers actually, to really put their publishing work on a firm footing that is community controlled and that is open source. So just in the last few minutes, just to spend a little bit more time on the Open Book Collective specifically. For those of you that don't know what the Open Book Collective is, so we are a non-profit, we're a charity here in the UK. We are community governed, and that means, not just having an advisory board, but having our members having direct control over the future of our organisation as kind of embedded in our articles of association and so on. We have stringent membership criteria to ensure that we're supporting only trusted open access infrastructures and publishers. And we're also sustainable. We commissioned an external review of our work that confirmed that at the end of our current funding period, which ends in April 2026, we will continue to be able to continue to sustain ourselves. It doesn't mean that we don't need more support. We certainly do. There's a difference between kind of bare bones sustainability and fully fledged sustainability, able to do everything that you want to do. But I think we're very much on that road. And then we also report transparently, and this is something that we think is really important. We just published our most recent annual report a couple of weeks ago. I'll put a link to it in the chat, and you can see some of the amazing work, I think, that our members are doing and the impacts they're having both on their disciplinary fields and on the ecosystem. And the way it works is that libraries can choose to support our initiatives. And it's the way that we do that makes it far, far easier for them to support a range of different open access initiatives through a single consolidated subscription. We're trying to make it as easy as possible for those libraries that are keen to support open access to do so through the offering that we make to them. All our members have their own individual tiered, what we call supporter program. So they determine the costings for those, they agree those with us, and then we offer those to the library. And then in return, the library receives benefits, and that includes things like annual reporting, sometimes usage data, sometimes discounts on hard copies. So they do receive something in return. But I also think it's fair to say that most libraries are supporting us, not just for those direct benefits, but because they're convinced that this kind of model provides a more sustainable way of doing open access publishing. Another kind of feature of the Open Book Collective, and this is a little bit different to some other initiatives, that we also have we also endeavour to support the wider global open access book publishing ecosystem, to further build that open source ecosystem that we just heard about just now. So all our members contribute to what we call the Collective Development Fund. This is a grant giving fund to build open access capacity, and we make that funding available via an annual call which initiatives can apply to. We issued 3 grants last year, totaling £45,000. Those are the 3 press releases for the first 3 grants. We're about to announce our next 4 awardees, 2 in Latin America, 2 in a particular African country, and we will also be launching our 3rd call in January next year. And this is very much present in my mind because actually just about 10 days ago, I was in Abuja in Nigeria, where I was invited to a conference which featured one of our awardees, which is the FUT Minna, that first award there. And they are doing just absolutely fantastic work to develop a new book publishing platform, and that has really set off a train of discussions in a Nigerian context where there is a real bit of momentum to embed Diamond open access and open infrastructures in their national open access policy. So I think that kind of really speaks to the potential of even what is a relatively small grant to just galvanize a community around open access publishing. Okay, but we need some other things, I think. We're not there yet. We need continued collaboration between books and journals initiatives. So Caroline mentioned some of those forms of collaboration that we've been involved in, and of course that needs to continue. We need even more interoperability between platforms and services. We of course need to redirect financial resources away from large commercial publishing, more knowledge sharing, and of course more collaboration. So not there yet, but I think we've made a really good, I'd say more than a start actually. I think we're on the road, and it's just a question of building towards that endpoint that I think many of us are invested in. And of course for that we do need support. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Joy. It's always great to see and always very positive as well to hear how the Open Book Collective have been successfully supporting open access book publishing. And now our next speaker is Dr. Robert Gatti, who is the co-founder and director of the Open Book Publishers, which is also a Diamond open access book publisher, and has been involved in the Copim Open Book Future project and in the creation and development of several open and not-for-profit infrastructures, supporting open access publishers, including DOAJ Open Metadata, the Open Book Collective, the Open Journals Collective, and the Opera's Metric Service. He's also a fellow in economics at Trinity College in Cambridge. And thank you so much, Rupert, for being here and taking part in this discussion. And now over to you.
Thank you very much indeed for the invitation to be part. I'll try and share this for a second. Hopefully you can see that. Is that working okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so thank you very much indeed. I'm going to take a sort of an overview and a little bit of a reflection on where we are. As it's just been said, I'm Ruby Gatti. I'm one of the co-founders of Open Book Publishers, which is a non-profit open access diamond book publisher, scholarly book publisher, and a large proportion of our funding, we're reliant on voluntary contributions from libraries and universities in two ways. One, through the library membership scheme that we've been running since 2014, where we now have about 270 odd libraries around the world that are supporting our publishing program, not individual books, but the publishing program as a whole, so that we can make sure that no author is required to make any payments. We also, though, do accept grants from authors if grants are available. So there's no requirement for grant funding, but if there's a grant that's available, then we do ask the authors to apply for those, and those quite commonly are funded through universities. Again, this is a non-compulsory, we'd publish the book without the grant as well. So we've got quite a few ways where this is sort of non-compulsory funding that is coming through to support the publishing that we're undertaking, and to ensure that authors themselves are not required to make any payments for publishing as part of the diamond. I'm also, as we've heard, there's a large number of diamond collective funding initiatives emerging, and they are collectively creating a very exciting and I think very powerful alternative publishing framework, diamond publishing framework. As we've just heard, I'm personally involved with four, which is Open Book Publishers, the Open Book Collective, which you've just heard from Joe, Open Journal Collective, which Caroline is leading, and Toad Open Metadata, which Joe has just mentioned. We also heard today about the Open Library of Humanities, and we will be shortly hearing, I think, about Opening the Future. But there's also many others that are emerging in recent years. We've got Subscribe to Opens and Paths to Opens, and many others. There we've got lots of initiatives trying to support open infrastructures, such as Invest in Open Infrastructures and SCOS. And so there's a large number of these collective funding initiatives and programs coming together, trying to seek collective library funding to support open infrastructures and diamond open access publishing. What I want to think a little bit, though, is about this concept of mainstreaming. What do we mean by mainstreaming these sorts of collective funding models? And I just take a sort of reflect where we are. A lot of, this is incredibly powerful, and it's incredibly important what is happening. There's also a slightly individualistic approach that is being developed, and that is around individualistic around initiatives and around libraries. And this differs from, say, the approach that's taken sometimes, say, in South America. So I'll come back to it. But in this case, each of the initiatives is approaching individual libraries to join their specific initiative. They're getting an initiative-specific coalition of libraries to support them. So it's a little bit initiative by initiative, going to libraries and trying to get their own community of support. they then need to justify the support at an individualistic level to the libraries, so that one's trying to pitch to the libraries to say, you as a library or a university will get specific gains, local gains from joining this group. And again, it's sort of very much pitched at the individualistic gain for the library rather than the collective gain. Each of the libraries then considers each of the approaches, the initiatives they're getting. Again, they can look at from their own, what is this giving us? Rather than thinking, what is the whole collective, what is collectively are they doing? And as we get more and more of these initiatives coming along, there's increasing pressures for libraries. This is beginning to make the libraries think, okay, so how do we prioritize, and how do we think about all of these as a group and a whole? But in some cases, I think there's still a danger that they're looking at individual gain rather than the collective group. This also means that a lot of the initiatives are going to be worried about free rider problems, and thinking about how do we incentivize the library to stay to our particular initiative when there's free, they could get these things for free. So we've got this sort of concentration about individual initiatives trying to get lots of libraries to act individually, or motivating collective action through individual gain. And we've also got a situation where libraries and universities, I'm using those terms interchangeably. I don't want to beat up on libraries, I don't want to beat up on universities, but they're responding to emerging initiatives and looking to see what is happening and what is being created, rather than initiating those initiatives. And so there's something about the way that this is all developing, which has got a sort of individualistic approach. And I just sort of worry through that a lot of these libraries and a lot of universities are coordinating over a lot of things, a lot of strategic things. There's many coalitions of libraries and universities exist. They're coordinating on all sorts of areas, including scholarly publishing, but they're not really engaging fully with Diamond OA yet in the same way. And so within the UK, for example, we have JISC, has big national coordinated level negotiations with publisher agreements, where they're getting large consultation across all sorts of libraries about what strategic objectives should be for the collective funding, for the collective agreement that they have with individual publishers. But that sort of level of strategic objectives, coordination, and purpose doesn't exist for Diamond open access strategies. Even when they do have coordination for what they call Plan B, what happens if they were to pull out of one of these big deals. But again, they haven't engaged Diamond OA as part of that plan. We have lots of groups. Again, I'm looking at the UK here, but we've got Russell groups, and we've got Northern groups, and we've got all sorts of groups, RL UK. We've got all sorts of groups of libraries that are coordinating activities together, but they're not presently seeing Diamond OA as a strategic objective within that coordination. So for me, mainstreaming Diamond means beginning to include some of the initiatives, the potential that has now developed in non-profit and open infrastructures and publishing, and beginning to embed them into coordinated library collective action, university collective action at local, national, and international levels. This requires also a mindset change from existing coalitions, where sometimes they say, look, and publishers, we want to get as much as we can for as little as possible, is sometimes the approach from some of the existing library coalitions. But we need to be able to bring together and work together collectively in defining objectives and working out strategic objectives for Diamond publishing initiatives. And then finally, just to throw in there, somebody has to mention at some point, managing AI. Again, AI is changing, will change, has changed the way that scholars and readers interact with scholarly communications. But presently, as a community, we're outsourcing, we're relying on sort of publishers to take the lead on how that should be negotiated with the AI developers. And again, that seems to be passing over something very important about scholarly communication, which should be part of a collective strategic agreement. Okay, so call for action. I would say, where do we start in formulating collective objectives and priorities for Diamond OA publishing nationally? Where do we start in coordinating that? Who should coordinate it? And when do we start? And of course, if anybody's got any answers, I'd be very happy to hear them. So please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rupert. How important it's very important the question that you have raised about coordinating collective action for the support of Diamond Open Access. We will probably have a conversation about that at the end of the session. So let's continue with the next speaker. Our next speaker is Dr. Kira Hopkins, who serves as the Scholarly Publishing Outreach Officer at Copim Open Book Futures, based at Birkbeck College in University of London. In this capacity, they implement Open in the Future, a Diamond Open Access revenue model for books. Alongside this, they are also assisting in the ongoing setup of the Open Journal Collective, a collective funding initiative for open access journals. They previously worked at Ubiquity Press, an open access publisher and publishing service provider, as a book editor, journal manager, and partner account manager, and also works as a freelancer book editor and copy editor. They completed a PhD at the University of Oxford in 2019, and we are very pleased to have you with us today, Kira. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Firstly, can you see my screen all right, my presentation?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, thank you for having me here today to talk about Opening the Future and its role in and approach to the concept of mainstreaming Diamond Open Access. Like the two other infrastructures, like the two other infrastructures that have come up today, the Open Book Collective and Tote Open Metadata, Opening the Future is part of the Copim Open Book Futures project, which is running from 2023 to April 2026, which is funded by Research England and the Arcadia Fund to create, implement and strengthen infrastructure for academy-owned scholarly monographs in humanities and social sciences. And broadly as a project, we aim to transform OA publishing by enabling small and mission-led publishing initiatives to flourish on their own terms. But thinking about Opening the Future specifically today, by its very nature, it takes a very different approach to supporting Diamond Open Access publishing to some of the other infrastructures discussed here today, in particular the Open Book Collective, which is a natural comparison as they both tackle Diamond Collective funding. And so to flip the panel title around, you could say that instead of or as well as mainstreaming Diamond Open Access, Opening the Future takes Diamond to the mainstream. This is because while Diamond Open Access is generally associated with born open access presses, Opening the Future was specifically designed to help small, mission-driven, but traditional publishers to transition to open access. And I'll explain how this works in a little bit more detail later on. The model was devised and fleshed out by Professor Martin Eve, who will be well known to attendees here as the co-founder of the Open Library of Humanities, along with Caroline Edwards, so our hosts today, among many other projects. This work was done with Tom Grady, who's now the work package lead for Opening the Future, along whom I work on Opening the Future, and Francis Pinter and Emily Poznansky, who were at the time at Central European University Press, which became our first participating publisher. So the model aims to help publishers who have an extensive history of publishing closed access material, and indeed the model actually relies on this to transition to open access in a low risk and sustainable way, rather than focusing on publishers who were born open access. So Opening the Future came into being during the first phase of the Copim project, which was from 2019 to 2023. It involved a partnership with two publishers, CEU Press in 2020 and Liverpool University Press in 2021, who came together with Opening the Future for a pilot project at that time. They both got off the ground properly during 2021, and we still work with both of these publishers to this day. So before I cover how the initial pilot and the subsequent work has gone, how does it actually work? The model is elegantly simple. Libraries purchase backlist packages from publishers at a discounted rate via a 3-year subscription, after which they have perpetual access to the books they subscribed to, i.e. they own them. The publishers then use this money only for frontlist open access titles. This enables the library to, with the same purchase, enhance their local collection with backlist, but also ensure that more of the same publisher's frontlist is open access, and therefore available not just to them, but to everyone. This fundamental relationship to a closed backlist is why the model only really works for publishers that weren't born open access, although we offer open access support and memberships without backlist content, which do actually do quite well with our library subscribers. And in fact, the longer term sustainability plan with this model, given that I'm sure you may already have been thinking, no publisher has endless backlist to package up. So this can't go on forever, so to speak. But the longer term sustainability plan is to transition library supporters to open access supporter packages away from backlist packages over time. And from a library perspective, the backlist aspect fits into expected acquisition channels, and this is another key feature. Not many libraries have dedicated open access budgets to support Diamond collective funding schemes. This mechanism allows them to use more conventional budgets to participate on the grounds that they're fundamentally buying content, which also happens to provide presses with OA frontlist funding. It therefore works with existing administrative and budgetary structures in universities. And we've also tried to make this as seamless as possible by working with known billing agents such as JISC and Lyrasis. Another key feature is that this goes one book at a time. And what I mean by that is that publishers ring fence the opening the future library funds they gain. And as soon as they've hit enough money in that pot to publish a title, they apply it to an upcoming book in the pipeline, and then that book goes open access. So rather than asking publishers to go all in on Diamond open access from the start, they can do so incrementally and with very little financial risk to themselves. This was really important because while there are a very small number of traditional publishers who have ended up as the face of traditional publishing, so to speak, and I don't need to say here they are, because they've all already come up for the most part. While they're incredibly wealthy, the vast majority of traditional publishers, be they university presses or society publishers or mission-driven commercial publishers, work on very tight margins and are not in a position to incur a high degree of financial risk, no matter how keen they are to enhance their capacity to publish open access and to do so without charging a BPC. So, as I mentioned, in 2021, this began as a pilot with CEU Press and Liverpool University Press. And we're still working with them. In late summer 2025, we also began a partnership with Michigan State University Press. And we also have 2 more publishers joining us, one imminently and one at the start of 2026. And although we're not able to name the publishers yet, both of them represent in different ways an expansion for us because neither of them are university presses. Of our current participants, each has taken a slightly different approach to how they implement opening the future. CEU Press has applied this model to their entire monograph publishing operation, committing around half their backlist in packages and using the fund across their entire frontlist. Their aim has been to convert their entire monograph frontlist open access with the help of this mechanism. LUP and Michigan State have taken a different approach. They focused on one subject area each, Hispanic and Lusophone studies and African and diaspora studies, respectively. And this malleability of the model to sort of scale with the publisher's abilities and needs and current interest is another feature of the model that's quite important to us, that we're working with the publishers rather than sort of imposing rigid requirements on them. And since it began, it's been going pretty well. We've raised about £550,000 from libraries, which has funded the publication of 45 open access titles so far, with many more in the pipeline. This last year, this represented about half the annual monograph front list from CEU Press and a third of the Liverpool Hispanic Studies list, which is an impressive jump given the relatively small number of years that Opening the Future has been operating. Many of these books would not have been published open access without this library support, and it's been great to see this tangible change. And for me personally, it's also been really exciting to see this collective funding enabling independent researchers who have no recourse to BPC funding to publish their work openly. It's also been very exciting to be able to measure the usage of these titles in a very crude way. For example, via the Open statistics, and using these, we calculated that last year, the OTF-funded frontlist titles were read on average about 30 times a day. And of course, there are many challenges, and some of these pick up on what Rupert was just discussing. And I know that broadly, many of my colleagues on the panel and in the audience will relate to the pain of some of these. One big problem is, how do we sort of collectively nudge the needle further so that library budgets are more structured to support and engage with these kinds of open access schemes? While the design of Opening the Future helps to sort of get around this by trying to work with what's already there, this is still a major problem facing all collective funding, including us. How do we change from being a nice to have, what my colleague Tom calls back of the sofa money, and gain reliable support from libraries, particularly in this very difficult financial climate? And as Rupert also mentioned, and as you will generally be aware, there has been a huge growth in the number of collective funding schemes in the last 5 years, comparatively speaking. And as these models proliferate, libraries do not have the time to, and do not want to engage with them all one at a time, when each has its own models, its own rules and whims, and it will give you this, but not that. It's complicated and time consuming. And I can't deny that Opening the Future has contributed to this, because in our setup, each publisher is a different offering to the library. They're not formally bundled. Although we do often do library and consortial outreach, bundling them, this isn't technically the case. That's a different kind of unsustainable, and how do we solve that? And also a question very specific to Opening the Future: what happens to us and our publishers after the Copim project ends? The current phase of the Copim Open Book Features project ends next April, and so we've been looking at sustainability post-project. And for us, that looks quite different to the other Copim infrastructures, because unlike the Open Book Collective and TOAT, which are both formalised as charities, Opening the Future was not set up that way and never planned to continue after April. Instead, we're working with our current participating publishers to ensure that they can continue to implement Opening the Future without our ongoing support. This is possible because Opening the Future, because it's not an organisation as such, but rather a mechanism that publishers adopt directly, it's more flexible in this way. While we do a lot of the work of library outreach and other administrative duties, the financial and legal relationship is directly between the publisher and the libraries that support it. So these relationships can continue without the Opening the Future team in the mix. Nevertheless, additional support with hosting offerings and billing will be necessary. And we appreciate that it will be really hard for new publishers to adopt Opening the Future without any support or guidance in the future, although it's theoretically possible because our documentation is published online. So we've been in talks with infrastructure providers to provide a lasting home or homes for Opening the Future without us, so that new publishers can take it on with some external support. These discussions are fairly advanced, and we have an announcement planned quite soon on this. We've also been working on another solution in conjunction with that, which will help to tackle a few different problems, in particular, the proliferation of models, the difficulty for new publishers to adopt Opening the Future without us, and also the very double-edged sword that anyone actually can do so, because Opening the Future is not trademarked and our documentation is freely usable by anyone. And that solution is also to set up a community of practice, sort of modelled on what the Subscribe to Open community has. We hope that this will provide a forum for support and advice between participating publishers, and may also enable them to, in some ways, scale their offerings together for libraries, for example, where there is a subject overlap between the different offerings. And we will also hoping to ensure that at least this core community of participants will adhere to self-imposed standards to do with, among other things, ensuring that OTF funds do not leave the publishing ecosystem via capital extraction for shareholders. We've been working on a set of collective principles for this group to adhere to, which will be available soon. And we're also seeking a sort of anchor point for this group. We have a couple of possible options, but we're more than open to suggestions if anyone has one. So thank you very much for having me to speak about opening the future, and I hope it has been interesting to hear about a slightly different approach to the concept of mainstreaming Diamond.
Thank you so much, Kira, for this presentation and for such important questions about sustainability and the challenges and the future of open access publishing. And now our last speaker is Joanna, who will be talking about DOAJ, which is an infrastructure that plays a crucial role in indexing and legitimating Diamond open access journals. Joanna is the Managing Director of the Directory of Open Access Journals, a community-led open infrastructure that curates a unique index of 22,000 diverse open access journals from around the world. She joined DOAJ in 2022 after spending over 25 years in academic library management and leadership roles in the UK and Denmark. Many thanks, Joanna, for taking the time to be with us today, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Paola. I'm just trying to work out how to share my screen. Oh, I think I've done it.
Yeah, we can see your
You
presentation.
can see it. Excellent. Great. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm really pleased to be here today with all these great speakers to talk about DOAJ's role in supporting and I guess mainstreaming Diamond. Yeah, okay. I hope everybody's familiar with DOAJ. We are one of the older infrastructures within open access. We're now 22 years old, and we have been collectively funded by libraries, and actually were founded by libraries originally. We are an index of open access peer-reviewed journals, and behind that index we are an organisation with a mission which is really focused on supporting the visibility, the reputation of all open access journals, regardless of business model, discipline, geography or language. Every journal within the index will have applied to be in DOAJ, and as part of that evaluation process, they will be evaluated against our quality criteria. Over the years, our quality criteria have become seen as a kind of gold standard for open access publishing, which means that our journals are trusted across the community. And in terms of what we are a non-profit community governed infrastructure based in Denmark, but we have a global team. I wanted to start with this, which is really an overview of all the journals within DOAJ and where they're from. So you can see just how diverse the index is. Some of the countries with the highest numbers of journals, so Indonesia, which has 2,500, Brazil, which also has very high numbers. Both of those countries have very high instances of Diamond publishing. So nearly all of the Brazilian journals are, because of Cielo, a Diamond, and Indonesia, about half of those journals are Diamond. So we see a lot of Diamond publishing within DOAJ journals. This is where we currently are in terms of the size of the index, and that should actually be 141 countries, because I've just found out in the chat that we have added Kosovo as a country. So I'm very proud to say we have journals from 141 countries indexed now. I would argue that Diamond is mainstream if you look at a really global perspective. So if we look at DOAJ's figures, and this were yesterday, we had 22,131 journals. About 2/3 of those don't charge any fees at all. And 41% overall charge no fees, and the author retains all rights. So that's a high proportion of the overall open access landscape. What we don't do, though, is we don't assess the community aspect of Diamond. It's not something we've ever looked at. It may be something that we look at in future. So we can't, some of those journals that publish with no fee may be with commercial publishers. So you can't be sure that they're community-led. But I want to talk about 3 different ways that we support Diamond and the mainstreaming of Diamond. And the first one, which I think is really important, is around quality assurance. I mentioned that every journal in DOAJ has applied and been reviewed, and this is our review process. It goes through the team, and you'll see the figures in a minute why we have such a convoluted process. But we manage the large numbers of applications we get through our triage team, through a very large group of volunteers who bring all sorts of expertise and understanding of both languages and local publishing contexts. We make the decision within the DOAJ core team. And then perhaps the most important part of this it's kind of timescale is a bit at the end, which is about feedback. So if a Diamond journal applies to DOAJ and doesn't get in because it doesn't meet our criteria, we give feedback as to what they're doing wrong. Is it because their copyright and licensing is incompatible? Is it because they haven't been transparent enough on their website around their editorial board or around the organization that runs a journal? So that enables journals then to go away and improve their standards so that next time they apply, they can get in. These are our statistics from last year, just to show you the scale of this. This is over 8,000 journals applying every year. And to handle those applications, we have a team from all over the world dealing with the journal editors and having conversations with the journal editors before they make decisions. We also have a quality team which focuses on suspected cases of questionable practices. So these might have been raised to us either by members of the community that have seen a journal in DOAJ that they think is suspect, or something that's come in through the application process. And they carry out investigations into much deeper investigations into everything around the journal or around the publisher. The number of cases that we're investigating is getting higher, and we're excluding journals and publishers for periods of between 1 and 3 years if we suspect questionable practices rather than just lower quality. And this is the key really to the quality assurance, because of all this work that we're doing and energy and time and money that we're putting into this evaluation. It means that the journals that have got into DOAJ are then trusted by funders. So all the Diamond journals who have successfully applied to DOAJ, and this is being presented from the UK, for example, in terms of UKRI and the funding that comes from UKRI. If you're a UKRI funded researcher, you are then eligible to publish in a DOAJ Diamond journal, which you wouldn't be if that journal wasn't in DOAJ. So it's a really important part of raising the profile and raising the reputation of Diamond journals, is making sure that they are included in funder policies worldwide. Another way that we support Diamond and mainstream Diamond is by enhancing the visibility of journals. We include, through all the work that we do, the some of the outreach work we do, we include a lot of journals which aren't found in some of the traditional commercial indexes like Web of Science or Scopus. And this is the results of some research that we did a couple of years ago that showed that basically half of our index wasn't found in other databases. What this means is that all these perhaps journals that would normally be overseen, and those are very often Diamond, they're often from underrepresented countries, in underrepresented languages. Through DOAJ indexing, they then go into library discovery systems and services worldwide, which means that these journals are much more visible to the whole community. We do this through our metadata. All of our metadata is open for use, reuse and distribution. It's picked up by lots and lots of discovery services and aggregators. I mean, for example, OpenAlex through our data going into OpenAlex, it means that OpenAlex is much more of a diverse and valuable index. We're picked up by search engines, obviously picked up by all the AI solutions out there. Library discovery systems and portals, and that's a really important one for us. So, for example, all our metadata goes into the Central Discovery Index for Ex Libris ProQuest products, and we have over 2,000 libraries that make worldwide that make DOAJ data available to their users. So for Diamond journals in DOAJ, its metadata will be spread across the world. And we're increasingly being picked up by external tools and services, loads of services being built at the moment around journal recommendation, open access workflow tools, and of course I mentioned the journal checker tool. Another way that we improve the visibility of Diamond journals is by talking about them all the time and promoting their work. We have a series called Journal Stories that we run regularly on our blog, where we feature journal editors from many of our smaller Diamond journals, where they have the opportunity to talk about their work and the importance of their journal to their community. And then the final way that I wanted to highlight today around how we support Diamonds goes back to the beginning, actually, and talking about improving standards in journal publishing. So we have an ambassador program, which we've had since 2016. These are volunteers from all around the world who work with us to promote journal quality, the importance of standards in publishing. They advocate for open access, and they work with local journal editors to help them with the application process to support their application into DOAJ. It's always nice to show some faces, and these Joanna and Yvonne are two of our ambassadors from Latin America. They've been with us a long time, and they're very active, and their work has really enabled us to get more journals from that region into the index. And this is just an oversight of the ambassador program as it currently stands. We're very much focused on low and middle income countries. Over and above that, DOAJ works a lot with the community to support Diamond, to support the development of standards within Diamond Open Access Publishing. These are just a couple of examples. The Jasper project, which is a collaboration between a number of infrastructures to support the very important issue of digital preservation of Diamond Open Access journals. We know that lots of journals disappear from the internet every year, and Diamond journals are perhaps the most vulnerable. They're often kind of a one-person band and they don't have the expertise and the knowledge about the importance of digital preservation. So that's really to combat that. And we also have an open access journals toolkit, which I'd recommend that you look at if you're a journal editor. This is a collaboration with OASPA this time, and it's an online resource that provides guidance for really every stage of the open access journal publishing process. And then to end, I just want to highlight the European Diamond Capacity Hub, which is something that that DOAJ has been involved in and will be involved in on an ongoing basis. It was launched earlier this year, and it's all about creating capacity, tools, and coordination for Diamond Open Access across the European research area. And as I understand it, that the UK is kind of attached to the European research area, so that's included too. As I mentioned, it's about coordination, developing tools and services, and making sure that Diamond Open Access journals are sustainable. It's a program of Operas, and we're developing a number of tools and services at the moment, which I'd really recommend that you take a look at. One of them is the Diamond Open Access Standard, which again is all about looking at all sorts of standards across Diamond Open Access Publishing, much broader than DOAJ. There's a Diamond Discovery Hub, which provides the visibility for Diamond journals across Europe. There's a registry, and if you sign up to the registry as a service provider or a journal, then you have access to the forum where you can, which is essentially a community of practice to discuss issues, problems around Diamond Open Access Publishing. And there's lots of other resources there, so please do take a look. Thank you very much. I'll hand back over now, so there's some time left for questions.
Thank you so much, Joanna. I see that there is a really interesting conversation in the chat that I will try to share by email with the attendees later on. We have 15 minutes for questions, so if any of you have any questions, you can post it in the chat. I have a question myself, so let's start with my question. Hopefully we can then continue with the others. As we have seen from these conversations, one of the main problems with Diamond Open Access are often more related to financial sustainability. And in this case, support often comes from libraries, which are obviously themselves under significant financial pressure, operating with reduced budgets and having to base their decisions on economic constraint rather than scholarly values. For instance, they may be forced to choose between supporting commercial legacy publishers and funding not-for-profit Diamond Open Access initiative. The situation obviously reflects a broader capitalization of research sustained by the prestige economy that privilege high-impact journals that are often published by commercial or, as Kira suggested, not profit-driven publishers over community-driven equitable models of knowledge dissemination. So if prestige continues to drive institutional decisions and researcher behavior, how can the Diamond Open model compete? This, of course, makes me think on the zombie journal campaign that we launched at the Open Library of Humanities a couple of years ago, and all the journal flips from commercial publishers to the Open Library of Humanities. But would you have any further thought on that? How can Diamond Open Access help us rethink reward systems in academia? Obviously, the Open Book Collective and Open Journal System are doing an incredible work to change this landscape, as well as the Diamas project. So if you have any thought about that. Caroline?
Sorry, was that a question to the panel?
Yeah, it's a question for whoever wants to take the lead.
I was just going to start by saying that, so kind of day to day, what I do is talk to journal editorial boards who are fed up with their publishers. I know there's been an interesting discussion about how do we define commercial, but mainly I'm talking about the big five. So a lot from Wiley and a lot from Taylor and Francis, Springer Nature. And I actually think that sometimes they're coming to us because they've been recommended by a colleague who's worked with the OLH before. And in some ways, Diamond or open access as a whole is a secondary concern. What they're interested in is a good quality experience, is working in a respectful way with a publishing partner or a publisher who gives them editorial autonomy and intellectual control of their material and of the way in which they run their journal, which is precisely the thing that's being taken away from them at these large publishers. They're forced into doubling or tripling the number of articles that they accept to maximize APC income, which is the business model. And so that means that they're very worried about the quality, and they also have huge and growing workloads that they can't sustain. So I think we just need to hammer home this point in all of our dealings with academic colleagues, at all of the kind of conferences we go to, whenever we're talking to faculty at our own campuses, that actually it's about quality and respect, and it's about working within the universities. The Library Publishing Coalition has set up an advocacy group on this, and they talk about keep the money in the mission. We should be funding initiatives that are campus based, that work with the academics, with the libraries, where all of the money stays within this system. There's no profit being extracted. So I really think the quality message is an interesting one to keep pushing.
Thank you, Caroline. And others? I see Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, just before this webinar, I was part of, I'm on the advisory board for a project which is called Morphs, which I can't remember what it stands for right now, but it's about open research in the humanities and the social sciences. Open research is something different from open access publishing. Maybe they're related, but they're not necessarily one and the same. So, open research, we're talking about things like open data sharing and so on. But then we kind of got into this really interesting conversation about how, and what they're doing as a project is they're thinking about how do we understand what this kind of concept of open research might be in the humanities and the social sciences, because often it's very much associated with sort of STEM type disciplines. And talk about the fact that, for example, could you consider a podcast a form of open research, right? And I know many colleagues, I'm a sociologist, I know many colleagues who've started podcasts, really successful podcasts actually, and they don't really consider that as doing open research. They consider it as maybe engagement or, making academic research public. And I think there is room to really explore these kinds of questions where you have kind of approaches that are very much driven by some of the same kind of ethos that we, have within the kind of open access community, but aren't really being recognized as connected to, open research or open access and so on. Because I think too often we talk about, too often open access is talked about as this very technical thing. Research is associated with kind of funded mandates and so on. And I think we need to be far better at talking about the way that this is actually this is connected to the work of, engaging broader communities and enabling anybody to access your work. I was having a conversation with someone just this morning about, a professor was complaining to them that their book had been uploaded to one of the kind of, pirate websites. And we were saying, wouldn't you be flattered? Wouldn't you be flattered if somebody had taken the effort to scan your book, upload it to a website so that more people can read it? Why would you care about the tiny bits of royalty money that you might lose? So I think it's about kind of changing the discussion a bit.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Do we have any more questions from the audience for the speakers? I see we don't have questions, so maybe let me see. So I'm gonna ask another question. So your organization have each experimented with collective library-based models to fund Diamond Open Access. What lesson have you learned from scaling these models that could inform similar efforts in other regions or even like disciplines as well? If any of you would like to provide an answer. Unless we have someone from the public that have a more interesting.
Could you repeat the question, Paula? Sorry, I didn't quite hear it.
Yeah, so your organization have each experimented with collective library-based models to fund Diamond Open Access. And what lesson have you learned from scaling these models that could inform similar efforts in other regions or even like disciplines as well? Any answer?
Rupert,
yeah, sorry, I'm not sure. Sorry, I fully got it, but certainly, what lessons have we learned, and what are our engagement with as well in other regions? I think engagement at TOAJ anyway. We've been and at the Open Book Collective as well. We've been working with colleagues, especially closely associated with Cielo and Cielo Books, and thinking about, again, how one can learn from their experiences, but also to think through how we can engage with them in slightly different objectives as well, and what they're trying to do with publications, and the way that they're wanting to process them. I'm not sure that answers the question, but and again, I know Joe, he mentioned that he was in Africa recently, and again, thinking through with how to work with these with groups in other regions to coordinate and make sure that we're working in collaboration rather than in alternative structures.
I just wanted to say that we have only 5 minutes left. I see that other people would like to also respond to this question, but we have a really interesting question in the chat that says, it's a very simple question that says, why just a few journals in the Global South that are Diamond Open Access? In the Global South, no, sorry. Why so few open access journals in the Global North? Because when we compare the Diamond Open Access landscape in Europe and we compare that with places like Latin America, obviously there is a huge difference in terms of numbers of Diamond Open Access journals. So I don't know if you have like 1 minute to answer this question before we wrap up.
Yeah, I can maybe have a go at that, just because I would say there are still lots and lots of Diamond Open Access journals in the Global North. So for example, there's 500 in Spain. I think in Europe there are loads. So there's maybe we know there's 500 in Spain, there's several hundred in Germany. We know there's 600 or 700, well, 600 in DOAJ from the US, and probably a lot more out there. I would say that it's down to history and the fact that the major commercial publishers are from the Global North and have dominated the way that scholarly publishing happens here, and the culture in for example, if you look at a service like Redalyc, it's based within a university. Publishing has always been part of the academic process, and it's a little bit like it's never left the academic process. It's always been embedded in it. Whereas I think in some of the Global North countries, we seem to have become divorced or let go of the control of our own publishing.
I think there was another question, Paula, from Judith Green. Judith Green had their hand up.
Let me see.
Oh, so it was just a very brief response to that, just from the perspective of an editor and editorial team, because the pressures, given that the for-profit sector has been so good at blocking down what looks like all of the indicators of prestige in the Global North and making it look like these are the journals to publish in, the kind of mountain you have to climb to get out of that system is, and I just speak as, we have in the last couple of years flipped a journal and left a commercial publisher. But luckily I've now retired, because it takes a huge amount of time to kind of, with no resources, to keep an open access journal open. And and we've been gifted by some fantastic work that has been submitted to us. But I do know that colleagues in countries like Australia just say, to get my next promotion, to not get kicked out of my university, I need to be publishing in Q1 journals. So the kind of reason why we haven't got more or a more vibrant sector is that there is still, I think there are still quite a few hills to climb to mainstream community-owned OA journals, at least. I mean, OA is not a problem anymore. I don't think the for-profit sector has really managed to kind of ratchet the profits out of that as well. But so it's very energizing to be here. Thank you so much, everyone, for an opportunity to have an optimistic and way forward for mainstreaming. It's great to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judith. It's totally clear that obviously we Diamond Open Access publishers need to work hand in hand with changes in prestige economy, because without that, the future is grim. So I think we will have to wrap up now. It's been really interesting. Thank you so much for all the speakers, all the attendees. We will share the recording on YouTube soon, and see you next time. I hope you all have a great weekend and a great end of the week. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.